Hey guys, I'm Raquel. Welcome to my channel Out of the Past, where I talk about all things classic movies. And this is the Classic Movie Roundup, where each week I talk about 3 classic movies that I watched. I discuss the classic movie related book that I'm currently reading, and that is followed by a wild card segment that changes week to week. So if that sounds of interest to you, keep watching. First movie this week is actually 2 movies on one Blu-ray disc, and it's this right here, Raymond Griffith, the Silk Hat Comedian. This was released by Undercrank Productions earlier this year, and that is a small distribution company run by silent film accompanist Ben Modell, and he does a wonderful job finding and restoring very obscure silent films and putting them out in these collections. He works in collaboration with the Library of Congress, and because he does silent film music, he does original scores for all of his releases. And this one right here stars Raymond Griffith, and it contains 2 7-reel comedies. The first one is Paths to Paradise from 1925, and then it's You'd Be Surprised from 1926. Paradise is a silent comedy about 2 con artists played by Raymond Griffith, the star, and Betty Compson, and they join forces to steal a diamond necklace. This necklace supposedly contains the largest diamond in the country, and it's about to be gifted by this wealthy man to his daughter on her wedding day. The bride's father is just way too careless with the diamond necklace, and he shows it off to party guests, reveals where the safe is, so you know he's going to be an easy target for these con artists. So the film mostly follows the hijinks of the duo as they try to steal the necklace and try to get away with it. It's funny because besides these 2 con artists, the only other character in the story who really knows what's going on is this dog, and it's just really cute to see how he interacts with the different characters in the sequences. There is also a thrilling car chase at the end, which is really fun to see given the fact that this is from 1925 and you kind of see Southern California before everything got really built up. Now, the final reel of this movie is missing, and the Blu-ray includes what could have been a final segment, which is just the musical score along with text description. And it basically surmises what would have happened at the end of the film, and that was deciphered from surviving stills from the movie, as well as information from a continuity script. And I think it was really clever to basically include what was the final reel in that particular manner. And it's interesting too that you could also just watch the first 6 reels and it kind of ends at a good place. So you don't necessarily need the 7th one, but it's cool to find out at least what it could have been. Next up is You'd Be Surprised from 1926, and this is a 7-reel comedy in its complete form. This is a murder mystery set in a mansion. It also involves an expensive necklace. And in the story, we see a district attorney at a fancy dinner party at his mansion, and he suddenly accuses his guests of stealing the necklace. The lights go out, and when they turn back on, the district attorney is prostrate on the floor, dead with a knife in his back. It all happens very quickly. Now, Raymond Griffith enters the story. He plays a coroner who comes to investigate. But he's not your average coroner. He's a bon vivant, dressed as nicely as the other dinner guests there. He wears a silk top hat and a tuxedo with tails. He's not what you'd expect. And he takes over the investigation because the group of quote-unquote bumbling cops aren't doing their job. So the story follows him doing all sorts of things to figure out who the killer is. Dorothy Sebastian plays his leading lady. She's the ward of the district attorney, and all throughout the film, she's generally thought to be the killer. Now, these 2 films are light, they're enjoyable, they're just over an hour each. Paths to Paradise is the better film in my opinion. I felt a bit bored with You'd Be Surprised. The hijinks they ended up being too much, and because it all takes place in one room, it just felt really stuck in one space. So I don't know, it didn't seem to be going anywhere. Whereas Paths to Paradise kind of jumps around and there's a lot of movement with the plot. I thought it was a much more interesting movie. Now, Paths to Paradise is a little problematic. It's set in San Francisco, and there is a sequence that takes place in Chinatown, and there are unfortunately actors in yellowface saying some very stereotypical things. But you could even skip that section and still enjoy the movie. Because now for some fun facts about Raymond Griffith. He's from my home state of Massachusetts. He was born into a theatrical family and was acting by the time he was a toddler. And he, at a very young age, lost his voice through a combination of overworking his vocal cords on stage and also about a respiratory diphtheria, which sounds awful. So he spoke in a hoarse whisper, which what didn't translate very well to the stage, but was fine with silent movies. So he really thrived in the silent film era. And if you're curious about the hoarse whisper, think of Jack Klugman at the end of his life after he had cancer and surgery and lost a lot of his vocal cords, but he still had enough in order to be able to speak in a whisper, and that's how he spoke the rest of his life. It's kind of similar to Raymond Griffith at this point. So during the silent film era, he was a very successful comedian. He had a signature style, kind of like the other comedians like Harold Lloyd had his signature glasses, Charlie Chaplin had his bowler hat and mustache, and Buster Keaton had a stone face. And Raymond Griffith, for him, it was his signature silk hat. That was his look. So Paths to Paradise and You'd Be Surprised are two films from his collaboration with Paramount Pictures. Many of those films are lost, so it's really special that we have these two, especially that we have them on Blu-ray to watch. So Raymond Griffith also worked with other people like Max Sennett and Cecil B. DeMille. He also worked with comedian Alice Howell on several films. I have that Alice Howell collection DVD from Undercrank Productions that was released a few years back, and I really love that collection. So there are a few films on there in which Raymond Griffith is working with Alice Howell. And he did try to transition to talking films, but it was very difficult because of his voice. So his career kind of stalled. His real final performance was in All Quiet on the Western Front, and I believe he played a dying French general. But his career ended up transitioning and shifting to producing. And in my research, I was delighted to find out that he worked as a producer or an associate producer, often uncredited, on some of my favorite films from the early 1930s. Three of my absolute top favorites, Babyface, The Gold Diggers of 1933, and Three on a Match were ones that he worked on. So I thought that was pretty cool. Modell does a great job with these releases. He had over 550 contributors to his Kickstarter campaign for this Blu-ray in particular. And both films are from the Library of Congress's Paramount collection. They're restored in 2K resolution from 35mm nitrate prints. I don't know very much about that kind of stuff, but it sounds very impressive, and they do look really amazing on this Blu-ray. It does also contain a 12-minute video essay narrated by film historian Steve Massa. Both Steve and Ben run this really cool series on YouTube called the Silent Comedy Watch Party. I'll link it below if you want to go check it out. So the little video essay basically just goes through Raymond Griffith's life and career, and it also includes an original score by Ben Modell, which I thought was a nice touch. So I highly recommend you checking this out, and I want to thank Undercrank Productions for sending me this for review. Now, continuing with Noirvember, let's talk about the film noir The Glass Key from 1942. This was a first-time watch for me, and I quite like this one. Directed by Stuart Heisler and based on the novel by Dashiell Hammett, The Glass Key is a film noir that explores the intersection between politics and the criminal underworld. Brian Donlevy is top billed as Paul Madvig. He's a sort of crime boss / politician who puts his efforts towards backing another politician played by Maroney Olson. He's Ralph Henry, and he's running for governor. Now, Madvig is in love with Ralph's beautiful socialite daughter, Janet, played by Veronica Lake, and is hoping that this arrangement will work in his favor in winning her over. Now, Alan Ladd plays Ed Beaumont, Madvig's henchman, his buddy, his right-hand man. This is a character who will do anything for his boss. He basically is there to support him and to clean up all of his messes. One of these messes is that Madvig's sister Opal, played by one of my personal favorites, Bonita Granville, is carrying on an affair with Ralph Henry, the political candidate who's running for governor, his son Taylor, who is basically the black sheep of the family. Madvig is not happy about this, so he wants to split them up, but it turns out that now Taylor is dead. What unfolds is like this complex crime drama. It is a little bit of a murder mystery, but really it follows Ed Beaumont, who is trying to protect Madvig, is falling for Madvig's girl, Janet, and all the while he has to deal with this very dangerous group of criminals who also want an opportunity to control the future governor and basically guide legislation in their favor. As I said, I really like this movie. The Glass Key is just a solidly enjoyable film noir. It's not the best I've seen, but I just really had a lot of fun watching it. I like the political intrigue, the messy family dynamics, and all that with like this seedy network of like underground gangsters. It was like a film noir, a gangster movie, romantic drama all in one. And it had some really dark moments. It really goes there, especially when Alan Ladd's character gets captured by the gangsters and is held captive. That's just really, really intense. And while I love Brian Donlevy, he is so good in The Great McGinty. If you haven't seen that yet, please watch it. He is top billed in this movie, but this is Alan Ladd's movie. He's pretty much the central character. He's the one the audience is guided through the story by, and Brian Donlevy kind of shows up in the beginning, kind of disappears, kind of shows up again, and then shows up at the end. But that spoke more to Brian Donlevy's fame at the time than his actual character. This is really an Alan Ladd movie, in my opinion. I did have a problem with the love story, the love triangle between Brian Donlevy, Alan Ladd, and Veronica Lake. It wasn't quite believable. And if you know the ending, you know the ending. That was like, oh, okay. Ladd's character seemed to be more emotionally attached to Brian Donlevy than he was Lake. It almost like his character hated her, despite himself also was attracted to her, but he's more devoted emotionally to Brian Donlevy's character, which I thought was interesting. And I was actually more interested to find out about Opal's love life. She has a really interesting storyline. She's the character played by Bonita Granville. She's got this connection to the underworld, and she's in love with the black sheep of this political family. I'm like, there's more of a story here. I would even watch a spin-off of just her storyline. I think that would be interesting. And I think that's another reason for me to read the novel, because maybe her character is more prominent in that, and maybe I could learn more about her. And as I always say, I love the small details in classic movies. And there was a small recurring sort of theme that I noticed throughout The Glass Key, and this was grooming. Now, bear with me. Okay, so you have Brian Donlevy in a scene with Alan Ladd, and that's where the whole Glass Key quote comes up, and he's putting on socks. And I'm like, I've never seen a movie in which a guy is dressing himself like that. Like, he's got his feet up on a desk and he's putting on these socks, and I'm like, that's just so interesting. And it kind of just opened my eyes, and I was looking for more things like that. There's another scene where he's brushing his teeth and Alan Ladd's just next to him and they're kind of talking. Thought that was interesting. Bonita Granville has this scene where she's in her apartment and her lover's in the other room, and she's at this beautiful vanity, and she's taking her perfume bottle and she's putting perfume on her neck. Thought that was interesting. And then a contrast that like gorgeous scene with a darker scene later on when Alan Ladd is like completely just swollen and bruised from being beat up, and he has been knocked out senseless. And when he comes to, he goes to the bathroom and puts his head under the sink and runs water all over him. And he goes into the medicine cabinet and he finds a razor, and that razor becomes key to how he gets out of that situation. All of that, for some reason, really of interest to me. If you like watching those kind of small details in films, let me know, because I live for that stuff. Paramount Film, and if you know Paramount Classics, you know sometimes they can be difficult to access. This one is actually available on the Criterion Channel's November Noir lineup. That's how I watched it recently. So I definitely recommend, if you have the channel, to make sure you check that one out. And if you want to keep celebrating Noirvember, they have quite a good list of noirs in that collection and in Noir by Gaslight. And this one, The Glass Key, is sometimes shown on TCM, but it is also available on Blu-ray from the Shout Factory. I think they have a limited run. So if you're interested in buying that, now might be the time. Okay, the third movie is Easy Living from 1949. This is from RKO, and it's a sports movie / romantic drama. It stars Victor Mature. He's a football player, quarterback, MVP at the top of his game. He finds out that he actually has a heart condition. His doctor, played by a very young Jim Backus, diagnoses him and tells him he can live a long life as long as he gives up professional sports. And unfortunately, he's not ready to do that. So his wife, Liza, played by Elizabeth Scott, really feeds off of his success and his fame. She's described as this like interior designer who has little talent. So she really needs to connect herself with people who are successful, because she is very passionate about being successful herself. And what she can't get from her husband, she actually looks for in a wealthy benefactor who promises to advance her career. And they have this full-on affair that puts a strain on her marriage with football star Pete Wilson. Liza is driven but incredibly selfish, obviously, which is the opposite of Lucille Ball's character. She plays Anne, the secretary to the football team's head coach. She's absolutely in love with Pete Wilson, and for very selfless reasons. She just wants to see him thrive and be happy. And while Pete's career is starting to suffer because of his health, his best friend Pappy, played by Sonny Tufts, is basically skyrocketing in his career. He's becoming very, very successful. And Pete Wilson's kind of downturn and Pappy's like rise up causes tension between the two, because they have been lifelong friends and are very close. Also in the cast is Jeff Donnell, who plays Pappy's devoted wife. Now on to some interesting facts. This was directed by Jacques Tourneur, who was also the director of one of my favorite films of all time, Out of the Past from 1947. That was also for RKO. He was an RKO director, but the main cast were basically borrowed from other places. Victor Mature was borrowed from Fox, and Elizabeth Scott and Lucille Ball were, I believe, freelance, but I've also seen somewhere say that they were borrowed from Hal Wallace. So, and they are pretty much the three main stars in this. This was the first film that Lucille Ball had made after ending her contract with RKO, I think like 7 years prior to this. She had moved to MGM and then eventually became freelance. And this was sort of at a turning point in her career. It wouldn't be long after. In fact, the following year, I Love Lucy would premiere, and basically her Lucille Ball's career would explode. And some years later, you know, Desilu Productions, her company with Desi Arnaz, would actually buy RKO. So it kind of comes full circle for her. In this film also is Kenny Washington, who was a player for the Los Angeles Rams. And the Los Angeles Rams, some of their team members are extras in this film. So Kenny Washington, along with Woody Strode, were two NFL players turned actors, and they were two of the first Black athletes to ever play in the NFL. And Kenny Washington has a small role in Easy Living as an injured player. So I thought that was really interesting. As far as sports movies go, football is featured prominently throughout the story, but it doesn't feel like a football movie, if that makes sense. It's not a very good sports movie. It's a better romantic drama. So, but if you're looking for a sports movie about a professional player dealing with a debilitating illness, The Pride of the Yankees with Gary Cooper playing Lou Gehrig is a far more superior film. But this one I think is more interesting as a romantic drama about two professionals, both at different, stages in their careers, and how that conflicts, more so than it being a sports movie. What is interesting, though, is the kind of storyline that is not very prominent but is important in Pete Wilson's story is his heart trouble, which causes him to not be able to play at his best. And his doctor tells him that because of a childhood bout of rheumatic fever, that his heart has been weakened, but he can still live a long life as long as he gives up, professional sports because of how intense the exercise is. This actually reminded me of Bobby Darin. And if you know Bobby Darin, he was an actor and singer, and he suffered a really, really bad bout of rheumatic fever as a child. In fact, he was told that he wouldn't see adulthood, that he wouldn't live past the age of 15 or whatever. And so when he did become an adult and he was still there, he basically knew he didn't have long to live, and that really changed the trajectory of his life. He basically knew he had to make the best of the time that he had, and it really influenced the decisions he made in his life, in his relationship with Sandra Dee, how he ended that very abruptly, and then also in the decisions he made in his career. He knew he wanted to do a lot of things, and he had a very short amount of time. So I had a fun time researching this one and also looking for some of the smaller elements in the film. One was really interesting. At one point of the film, you see a group of extras walk down a flight of stairs, and one of them is a woman carrying what looks like is a radio purse. It's basically a portable radio attached to straps that she carries on her shoulder, and in the sequence you can hear the play-by-play of the latest football game being spoken through the speaker on the portable radio, and then kind of shifts. So basically it's a sequence to show that the public is really, really interested in what's going on with the football team, which is unnamed. It's just the local football team. And I tried to look up radio purses. There was not much information out there. I definitely want to do more digging. I did find this one image, which I'll put on the screen, of a radio purse. And it was on eBay, and I believe it was just somebody who wanted to see if somebody had an actual radio purse and could sell it to them. So it would be interesting to see if there are any in existence out there. They probably weren't terribly popular, but maybe they had a little run in the 1940s. And as a kid, I used to have a small portable handheld television that I took everywhere with me. Had this really long antenna and this really, really tiny screen. This was way, way before iPhones and Android phones, and you can watch whole entire movies on a very small device. Something else that caught my eye is the secondary storyline that is told through newspaper headlines. So you have June Bright. She, in real life, was a famous model throughout the 1940s and 1950s. She appears in the film in a small role as a model named Billy. And we're first introduced to Billy through the front page of a newspaper that's folded in half. And in that early sequence, the actress Jeff Donnell is having breakfast, and she's looking she's trying to look at the newspaper that her husband is currently reading, and the headline says, "Local girl is named aquatic queen," and you see basically the model posing. So then later in a dinner party sequence, June Bright actually has her one small acting bit where she's a guest at a party and she is flirting with Pete Wilson, who is the Victor Mature character, the football player. And then we later learn on that the same man that Elizabeth Scott's character is having an affair with also had an affair with the model Billy. But he was her wealthy benefactor, her lover, and then he discarded her. And she unfortunately commits suicide. And we find out about her death through this sequence where Elizabeth Scott's character is completely distraught. She's in her apartment. She's about to have a confrontation with her lover, and there are newspapers strewn all across the floor. And each of them has a different image in a different headline. One of them says, "Beauty takes a plunge," and it has this image of June Bright as Billy. She's, you can just pretty much see her face, her hair kind of cascades upwards. Her eyes are closed. She has this kind of serene look on her face, and I think it's supposed to be like a death photo. And that reminded me of something. It reminded me of that image, The Most Beautiful Suicide, which was an image, a photograph of Evelyn McHale, who committed suicide in 1947. She jumped off the Empire State Building and she landed on a car. And the way she landed and how she was dressed and made up, like it was a little bit of like this, the beauty of life, but then the harshness of death all in one image. It's well known. Chances are you know the photo I'm talking about. And I wonder if that was the inspiration for this whole storyline, because the image of June Bright on the newspaper, in particular, the one that says "Beauty takes a plunge," I think is suggesting the image of The Most Beautiful Suicide photo, which was released a couple years before this film. I did a little digging, and June Bright, that same image, a similar pose appears in a July 1945 edition of Esquire. So I wonder if they just had her pose in the same way and they were both inspired by maybe that image and then also the famous photograph. So I don't know. If you know that photograph, let me know. It's one of those really infamous photographs and stories. And now for the title. With the glass key, it kind of makes sense for the storyline. Easy Living has absolutely no reference to anything that's happening in the story. I mean, you could say these wealthy people are living easy, but they're not real. They're really not. It really has nothing to do with the story. It is the title of the famous jazz standard, Easy Living. I particularly love that song, especially the renditions performed by Chet Baker and Billie Holiday. I do really love that song. So it is performed by Audrey Young in the film in a dinner party sequence much later in the film. So I don't know if, I don't know what the reasoning is behind naming the film that title. I don't know if it was like, okay, we have, like, this song is really popular, let's use it as a hook. I'm not really sure what the connection is, but I just thought that was interesting. So Easy Living, I recorded off of TCM, and it was part of that Lucille Ball Summer Under the Stars day. I've been kind of making my way through those movies. This is available to rent on VOD on Apple, Vudu, and Amazon Prime. And I believe the Amazon Prime one is part of the Warner Archive Collection group of rentals. And the Warner Archive Collection also has this available on DVD. So it is available to either rent or to buy. Okay, now for the book I'm reading. I'm still reading A.K.A. Lucy, The Dynamic and Determined Life of Lucille Ball by Sarah Royal. I'm sorry I haven't finished this yet. I hoped that I would have finished it by the making of this video, but just time escaped me. I'm only about halfway through the book. I'm now at the part where she is transitioning into her television career. So there was quite a bit of interesting information about her time at RKO and her time at MGM. Some interesting facts. Ginger Rogers' mom, Leela Rogers, was very instrumental in helping Lucille Ball in her career. She gave her some really good career advice. She basically orchestrated a full makeover for her and really guided her. I thought that was interesting. And she made an impression too on Eddie Cantor, who she appeared in Roman Scandals. That was her first film, and because she impressed him, he basically got her some extra screen time with a really funny gag. And she also impressed like other people too, like Bob Hope specifically asked for her for a movie. I thought that was interesting. And it goes into detail about her being really hard worker, making those connections, and being willing to take any opportunity that came her way. So now I'm at the Isle of Lucy part, and I'm really interested in learning about the movie she made with Desi Arnaz, and then the movie she made later on. My 3 favorite Lucille Ball movies are Yours, Mine, and Ours, The Facts of Life, and The Long Trailer. And I really hope this book has some information about those 3. So hopefully by next week I will have it finished and I can give you a full review. Okay, the wildcard segment this week is a little different. I actually went to go visit Sonny Tufts' grave site recently in Lexington, Massachusetts. Now, for those of you who don't know, actor Sonny Tufts was actually from a prominent Massachusetts family. His great uncle was Charles Tufts, who made a lot of money in a brick making business that he ran, and he used his money for various philanthropic efforts. And he was a big landowner too in Massachusetts, and he donated like 20 acres to a university, and that university became Tufts University in Medford, Massachusetts. Obviously it was named for him, and that eventually led to Tufts Medical Center in Boston and the health insurance Tufts Health Plan. So the Tufts name is very, very well known, just nationally, but specifically in Massachusetts. And even earlier in his lineage, in like the 1600s, you can trace it back to Peter Tufts, who was one of the early settlers in Massachusetts. So the Tufts name is very, very integrated in Massachusetts history. So Sonny Tufts lived with his family in Arlington, Lexington, Winchester, and Medford, which I thought was really interesting. And he's laid to rest in Monroe Cemetery in Lexington, Massachusetts. I'll put some photos up so you can see. He's in a family plot along with his father, Bowen, whom he's named after. He was actually Bowen Tufts, and Sonny, I believe, was just like a nickname that kind of stuck. He then also in that same family plot is his mother, Octavia, his brother David, and his sisters Mary and Jean. And if you look at the tombstone, you'll see that Jean has a birth year but not a death year. But I did find out that she actually passed away in 2011. And the death year, for some reason, hadn't been put on the tombstone. And right across from the big family tombstone are all smaller headstones for the different family members. And Sonny Tufts has a small headstone right across from the family headstone. His little headstone was sunken into the ground, and it was covered with leaves and a bunch of other stuff. So I kind of cleared it off a little bit. I took some photos and I submitted them to Find a Grave. So because the photos that were on his memorial on that website were from over 20 years ago. So I thought it might be good to have some updated pictures, especially since the family headstone had changed since then. So I don't know, I just thought it was interesting to learn about Sonny Tufts' local connection to me. If you're not from Southern California, do you have a classic movie star who was local to you? I mean, if you were from Southern California, all of them were local to you at one point. But if you're from somewhere else, is there a classic movie star who lived near you, who you could maybe pay your respects to? This is something I'm interested in. I really want to go visit some more grave sites. I have on my list Thelma Todd, who was from Lawrence, Mass., Anne Revere, who's laid to rest out in Cambridge, and Helen Walker, who is laid to rest, who's from Worcester and laid to rest in Stirling. So there are several people that I would like to pay my respects to. So I'm glad that I went to go pay my respects to Sonny Tufts, especially since it was just after having seen him in Easy Living. Well, that's all for today. In the comment section below, I would love to hear what would be the best classic movie related present that you could get this holiday season. Whether it's a film box set, a new 4K release, a book, maybe a poster, a lobby card, even maybe a script. I would love to actually get some shooting scripts and own a few of from my favorite films. So what would be the best classic movie present that you could get this holiday season? I'd love to know. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.